Pushkararunirijyatra ye brahmanagatim gataka abrahat kshatrasya putro bhubud dasti yad dashtinapuram. So, Gargat, from Garga, another grandson of Bharadwaja. Shinihi, a son named Shini. Tataha, from him, Shini. Gargyaha, a son named Gargya. Shatrat, although he was a Kshatriya. Brahma, the Brahmanas. He, indeed. Avartata, became possible. Duriktakshaya, a son named Duriktakshaya. Mahaviryat, from Mahavirya. Another grandson of Bharadwaja. Tasha, his. Tayarunehi, the son named Tayaruni. Kavi, the son named Kavi. Pushkararunehi, a son named Pushkararuni. Iti, thus. Atra, therein. Yea, all of them. Brahmana gatim, the position of Brahmanas. Gataha, achieved. Rahat kshatrasya, of the grandson of Bharadwaja named Brahat Kshatra. Putraha, the son. Abut, became. Hasti, Yat, from whom? Hastinapuram, the city of Hastinapura, New Delhi, was established. So translation, from Garga came a son named Shini, and his son was Gargya. Although Gargya was a Kshatriya, there came from him a generation of Brahmanas. From Mahavirya came a son named Duriktakshaya, whose sons were Trayaruni, Kavi, and Pushkararuni. Although these sons were sons of Duriktaksha, took birth in a dynasty of Kshatriyas, they too attained the position of Brahmanas. Rahat Kshatra had a son named Hasti, who established the city of Hastinapura, now New Delhi. Okay, I guess we can repeat. From Garga came a son named Shini. And his son was Gargya. Although Gargya was a Kshatriya, there came from him a generation of Brahmanas. From Mahavirya came a son named Duriktakshaya, whose sons were Trayaruni, Kavi, and Pushkararuni. Although these sons of Duriktaksha took birth in a dynasty of Kshatriyas, they too attained the position of Brahmanas. Rahakshattra had a son named Hasti, who established the city of Hastinapura, now New Delhi. So, purport. So read the next text with its purport. Ajamido advidmidachcha purumidascha hastinaha ajamidascha vamshasyu priyamedadiyodvijaha. From King Hasti came three sons named Ajamida, Dvimida, and Purumida. The descendants of Ajamida, headed by Priyameda, all achieved the position of Brahmanas. So, purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. This verse gives evidence confirming the statement of Bhagavad Gita that the orders of society, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra, are calculated in terms of qualities and activities. Guna, karma, vibhaga saha. All the descendants of Ajamita, who was a Kshatriya, became Brahmanas. This was certainly because of their qualities and activities. Similarly, sometimes the sons of Brahmanas or Kshatriyas become Vaishyas. Brahmana, Vaishyatham Gataha. When a Kshatriya or Brahmana adopts the occupation or duty of a Vaishya, Krishtigoraksha Vanijam, he is certainly counted as a Vaishya. On the other hand, if one is born a Vaishya, by his activities he can become a Brahmana. This is confirmed by Narada Muni, Yal Lakshanam Proktam. The members of the Varnas are social orders, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra, must be ascertained by their symptoms, not by birth. Birth is immaterial, that means it doesn't matter. Quality is essential. So, all right. Om Gana Timiranda Shah Gananjana Shlakaya Chakshur Minitam Yena Tasmai Shigurve Namaha. So obviously today's topic is Varnashrama. So Varnashrama is a very interesting topic, and of course we all know that Srila Prabhupada stated when he was getting ready to leave this world that 50% of his work was unfinished, and that was the institution of Varnashrama. Now, let me unpack that. One of the things that inspired Srila Prabhupada to make that particular statement was the unfortunate occurrence of many of the devotees blooping. Blooping means when you take a nosedive into the water. Actually, Srila Prabhupada came up with that particular expression, explaining how the spirit soul, or the process that the spirit soul utilized to come to the material world, and went, yeah, bloop, like that, as someone enters water. So, Prabhupada, in the beginning of the Krishna consciousness movement, had pretty high expectations of us. He thought, when someone takes a vow, that's it, they're going to stick to their vows, because Prabhupada was raised in a very high-class situation, which was, I think, quite a bit of difference, I may be mistaken, from America, or from the world in general. Quite a bit of difference, where if people made a promise, like people got married, that's it. Okay. Or people made a promise to take care of, whatever their parents, for example, their parents in the traditional Indian culture, and actually traditional cultures, even in the West, up to a few years ago, people would just take care of their parents until their parents passed away from this mortal world. And unfortunately, we don't have that sort of culture in the Western world, and in India, that sort of culture is in the wane at this particular point. So people can't really depend upon their kids to take care of them for the rest of their lives. And, basically you have to look out for yourself nowadays. So, anyway, because of that, and Prabhupada was projecting his own understanding of culture upon the Western world, and he was sorely disappointed. Then people weren't able to comply with their promises or obligations in Krishna consciousness. So Prabhupada understood that there had to be a fallback position. Fallback, of course, is Varnashrama. So it's not a complete fallback. It's not like if you can't chant Hare Krishna, then just be a Kshatriya. If you can't chant Hare Krishna, then just make money. That's not what Varnashrama is. In the Bhagavatam, Varnashrama is described in a very interesting way. It's in Samsirir Haditoshana. That the purpose of Varnashrama is Haditoshana. Just like Toshana means to please. Hari means to please Hari. So the whole purpose of Varnashrama is to render service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Actually, I was reading in the Jayavadharma by Bhaktivinoda Thakur that Bhaktivinoda Thakur was describing this purpose. He says that's the essential aspect of Varnashrama, so that one can execute sadhana bhakti. In other words, that's the reason for Varnashrama. So that one is engaged according to one's psychophysical nature, so one is enthusiastic, feeling fulfilled, his needs are being met, so that he can proceed very nicely in executing sadhana bhakti. So that's the whole purpose. So, therefore, it's very important for people to understand their psychophysical nature. But it's not an excuse to neglect sadhana bhakti. One has to understand that. Because sadhana bhakti is on a completely different level. You know, like Bhaktivinoda Thakur describes, we have duties. You have aharika, paramarthika duties. We have ordinary duties, and then we have transcendental duties. And it's interesting, this is a very interesting story in the, several stories actually, in the Jaiva Dharma about Varnashrama, how people sometimes are identifying their material duties in Varnashrama, Vyavaharic duties, with their identity. In other words, one may think, because I have a duty or I have a varna of being a Brahman or Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, that's what I am. You ain't that. The philosophy of Krishna consciousness still applies, you know, sarvo padi vinir muktam, tat paratvaina nirmalam rishikena rishikesha sevanam bhakti ruchite. What is the philosophy? These upadis, they're just designations. They may be useful right now to have an upadi. You know, we definitely have upadis. They're useful under certain circumstances, just like when I came into the United States, I had an upadi that I'm an American citizen. They asked me, you know, what is your citizenship? And I said, American citizen. Here's my passport. That's an upadi. It's useful for serving Krishna. So Varnashrama is useful for serving Krishna. So, but one has to think beyond that. So there was a story in the Jaiva Dharma where there are these brahmanas, very proud brahmanas, and they were visiting the Vaishnavas. And then one day, as the Vaishnavas and brahmanas were getting together, they were visited by the Nawab, that is the Muslim leader. And this Nawab happened to be the descendant, not saying disciplic descendant, but actually a seminal descendant of the Nawab Hussain Shah, who Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave his mercy to. I mean, that's the story, of course, in the Chaitanya Bhagavad, Chaitanya Charitamrita, of when the Nawab first got very upset with the Sankirtan. Actually, it's interesting that it wasn't the Nawab who was upset with the Sankirtan, it was the ritualistic brahmanas. And they were the ones who made a complaint. You know, they sent a tweet out, you know, sort of like they do nowadays, to the Nawab. Why were they upset? Well, they said, you're disturbing the Supreme Personality of Godhead because you're chanting loudly. Especially, you shouldn't chant loudly during the 4 months of what? Chaturmasya period. Because Vishnu was sleeping during that time. I mean, this is a traditional Indian thing that you're not supposed to get married during that time. Because if you get married during that time, you're going to wake up Vishnu and he's going to be upset. You know, it's not going to work out too well. So, people in India come up with all these different rituals. I mean, for example, there's one lady in New Zealand who was supposed to take initiation for me for the last 5 years. But it so happens I keep visiting New Zealand during the period of Pita Paksh. You know, she's chanting 16 rounds, but I keep visiting during this period, you know, where you're supposed to worship the forefathers. And then sometimes I visit during the period when you're supposed to worship the Deva Paksh, when you're supposed to worship the Devas. So, you know, so somehow or other, of course, this year I'm going to be visiting New Zealand during the normal time, so she's going to be able to take initiation after 200 years in the Hare Krishna movement. So, you know, so this whole concept of all these different rituals that really go against the basic principle of bhakti. Of course, the basic principle of bhakti is to always remember Krishna and never forget Krishna, the first two rules. And that was actually another point brought out in the Jaiva Dharma that you have Rajanath asking Babaji, if one is a Vaishnava and they have to follow all the Vedic rules, how can they do that? And he says, look, you take out the Vedic rules that are favorable for Krishna consciousness and you don't follow ones that are unfavorable for Krishna consciousness. And how do you understand what is favorable, what is not favorable? Well, you go by this principle given to us by Rupa Goswami. Anyami lashita shunyam jnana karma navartama krishnana shilana bhakti uttamam. What is the principle? The principle is you should always be serving Krishna according to what he wants. And you have to do it devotionally and enthusiastically. That's called, it's a technical word for you, svarup lakshana. These are the principal features of bhakti. And there's also tatashta lakshana. That means the secondary principles of bhakti, which are like jnana karma navritam, not being interested in gross sense gratification or subtle sense gratification or liberation, stuff like that. So anyway, that's how you understand, or the Acharya, not how you understand, but the Acharya understands what you should do, what you should not do. And the Acharya applies according to time, place, and circumstance, and even in different countries, in different locations, in different cultures, he applies the principles of bhakti differently. For example, right now, because after Prabhupada left, the devotees are applying so many principles of bhakti and deity worship and everything that things become so confusing that hardly anyone wants to join the Hare Krishna movement because it's complicated. When I joined the Hare Krishna movement, it was chant Hare Krishna and you'll be happy. But now, it's chant Hare Krishna, learn 1,001 mantras, mudras, and different expressions, and then maybe you'll be happy. So anyway, so if we want to attract people, we have to make Krishna consciousness or present Krishna consciousness according to the scenario. If you want to attract ritualistic brahmanas, sure, go ahead. That's why Prabhupada, when he had the deities installed in Vrindavan, he had all the ritualistic brahmanas do their different things. And Prabhupada said the deity was installed not because of the rituals, but because of the Harinam Kirtan, the chanting of the holy name. So, anyway, just remember that point. So, getting back to the story. So, the brahmanas, they were complaining that Lord Vishnu was being disturbed by these Vaishnavas who were chanting at night and chanting during the Chaturmasha period. So they went to the Kazi and they said, "Our dear Kazi, please stop it." And the Kazi, of course, he sent his men out, and of course they broke the mridanga, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu instituted his the first civil disobedience movement, well before Mahatma Gandhi instituted his civil disobedience movement. And the Kazi had an epiphany. That means he had a realization. What was that realization? The Lord Nrsimhadev appeared to him in the middle of the night and said, "Don't ever disturb my devotees again, or else I'll rip you and rip your chest." And he actually sat on the Kazi's chest, and the Kazi had some marks from his chest. Actually, it's very similar to what happened in Fiji, that some of the people from a different religion attacked our temple, and their chief was told by, not Lord Nrsimhadev at that point, but it was by a Kaliya, the serpent Kaliya, "Don't ever touch my devotees again or else I'll kill you all." So you see, Krishna protects his devotees, or Krishna's devotees protect the devotees. So the Kazi was told that, and the Kazi relented, and so therefore the Kazi took a vow from now on, no one's going to interfere with the Krishna conscious movement. And then the Kazi actually took up Krishna consciousness. Now, in his own culture, which is really interesting. Not that he changed his dress for the Muslim dress or anything like that, and he also continued to use Arabic, because there's a discussion between the Kazi's descendant and some of the devotees the Jaiva Dharma, where they're discussing different Arabic terms, how they refer, like Ru. Does Ru refer to the soul? What does it refer to? And so the Kazi took up the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, took up the chanting in terms of chanting Allah rather than Hare Krishna. So in other words, he became a devotee, which is nice. And so when he became a devotee, and because he was a devotee, and he was having this philosophical discussion with the Vaishnavas, the Brahmanas were fried. You understand? The Brahmanas watching that whole thing. How can you, even if we see the face of such a person, we're supposed to run into the Ganges without taking our clothes off and jump in? Or, there's other injunctions, you just like look into the fire, look into the sun to purify your eyes or something like that, because you blind yourself by doing that. So, this was the whole discussion. And so they came back very upset. Actually, they were so upset that they brought back, in the next day or two or three, a whole bunch of like really expert Brahmin pundits to just like teach the Vaishnavas a lesson. Of course, the Vaishnavas taught them a lesson because there was this nice Vaishnava Das who was previously a Mayavadi sannyasi who had studied all the Vedanta and everything like that. He was able to just like completely defeat them, and the Brahmanas went back with the tail between their legs, so to speak, understanding that, Vaishnavism is transcendental. However, there was another point, that when the Brahmanas were discussing with the Vaishnavas, particularly Vaishnava Das, about the differences between the castes and the milechas and everything like that, they asked, should a Vaishnava or should a Brahmana who has a daughter have that daughter married to a Muslim? So they were talking about that. And Vaishnava Das said, no. And the reason for that was keeping the social stability. So a Vaishnava is not aloof from vyavaharic or ordinary dealings in this material world. In fact, one of the qualities of a Vaishnava is that he's daksha, he's expert. So a Vaishnava understands, such as a Vaishnava such as Srila Prabhupada, understands how to utilize this material world, not to create like a social disorder. He said, there was another question raised by the ritualistic Brahmanas, is this Kazi, because he's taken up Vaishnavism, qualified to perform like a yajna or a sacrifice? And the Vaishnavas replied, no, because that's all vyavaharic stuff. In other words, it's just like ritualistic stuff. But he's qualified as a Vaishnava, therefore we respect him. Therefore we have a conversation with him. So this is also interesting, like interreligious wise, that we respect and honor those of other religions or other religious cultures. We don't denigrate them. We appreciate that they are worshiping the same, as Bhaktivinoda Thakur says in the Chaitanya Shikshamrita, they are worshiping the same God that we have, but in a different way. It's just wonderful. So when I see someone, like of course I study different religious performances, particularly Christianity, since it's so popular in the Western world, when I see them doing that, I like it. It gives me joy to see that. So, and that's a type of Vaishnava. So, of course, there may be varieties or different grades of understanding of Vaishnavism, but still they should be appreciated. Anyway, so that's the point. Varnashram, yes, but don't confuse that with Vaishnavism. Don't confuse that with transcendental understanding that we're a spirit soul, part and parcel of Krishna, the yastu sarvani bhutani atmane bhavanupashati sarvabhuteshu chatmanam tatogna vikagupshati. Don't confuse that with that we're supposed to love and trust, we're supposed to love and not hate any other entity just because the body is different. So we have to function on those two levels, Varnashram. And One is understood to be Varnashram according to their guna and karma. And that's the standard thing the Prabhupada always talks about. This verse is talking about, or purport is talking about, Chaturvarna Mayashrishtam, guna, karma, vibhagasha. So we may have a particular devotee or a particular child or a particular relative. We want to be a Brahmin, but if he's not a Brahmin, let him be what he's supposed to be. You know, if he wants to fight, encourage him in that. Isn't it? We should encourage. It's a positive. But remember Krishna. Do your prescribed duty. But remember Krishna. But your prescribed duty is also Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare. Both are prescribed. Both have to go simultaneously. You can't, if you just take Varnashram, that's without chanting Hare Krishna, that's a Sura Varnashram. That's the demons. The demons follow those things. I mean, you find, like Jarasandha, he followed Varnashram, right? So when Bhima, Krishna, Arjuna came in the guise of Brahmanas to see Jarasandha, he was known to receive Brahmanas nicely. Of course, he didn't receive Kshatriyas so nicely. He wanted to offer them to the goddess Bhadrakali or something like that to get power. He thought, the more Kshatriyas I can offer, the power, I'll get the power of the Kshatriyas that I offer. It's interesting, isn't it? It's like Prabhupada talking about the Muslim who ate 1,000 chickens by feeding one chicken to another. Anyway, has nothing to do with the story. But anyway, so, but still he followed Varnashram. The Brahmanas came, oh, what do you want, my dear Brahmanas? And even he followed Varnashram to a certain extent with Krishna and Bhimsen and Arjuna, because at night, after they stopped the fighting, they all got together and had a good old time. They drank and ate together. So, that's Varnashram. So he was following Varnashram, but Asura Varnashram. So remember that to really follow Varnashram, the purpose of Varnashram, Samsiddhir Haridoshanam, which I quoted at the beginning of this class, which means to please Krishna. Then in this Kali Yuga, Kali Kalera Dharma Krishna Nama Sankirtan, that in this Kali Yuga, there is one Dharma really. Krishna Nam Sankirtan, also in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, is Ekon Dharma, Eka. There's one Dharma, Krishna Nam Sankirtan. So remember that. And then we can actually follow Varnashram. So any questions or comments? Yes?
I was thinking as you were speaking about the Kazi and how he became a devotee but in his own form.
Yeah.
That really we're speaking of devotees in general.
Yeah.
And then there also is Gaudiya Vaishnavism in particular. So we have a devotee, let's say a general devotee, which includes everybody.
Yeah.
But there still is a distinct Vaishnava culture.
That's true.
Inside. So it's kind of a two-part. We have to be able to appreciate our own Vaishnava culture and live that. But at the same time, these other people are devotees, but broadly speaking devotees.
Yeah, they're broadly speaking devotees, or some of them may be pure devotees in their own particular culture. It's not that we should think that we're better than them. I mean, it's really important not to think that because we have all this knowledge, we do have more definitive knowledge. I mean, just objectively, we do have more definitive knowledge about God than anyone else. And that's objective. But it's not because I have more definitive knowledge, I have more devotion. There's two separate things. It's not knowledge. Jnana does not equal bhakti. They can have more bhakti than me. That depends on them, their particular relationship. They can have more bhakti for Lord Jesus Christ than I do. And that's the real thing. Bhaktimam abhijanati yamanyas chasmi tatvataha. However, yes, we do stick to our own culture. I mean, we're not going to, of course, what happened in New Vrindavan many years ago, they put the Vyasas on Jesus Christ there. And the devotees were walking around in monks' robes. I mean, That's really not the right thing. You stick to your own culture. And that's the point in the Jaiva Dharma, that you stick to your own culture. They didn't say, we mix intimately every day with a Kazi, even though he's a Vaishnava, we respect him in that way. So it's a balance. It's a balance. And obviously we have to be able to identify what particular things are essential to our culture. I mean, it's not, certain things that we consider to be essential to our culture may not be essential or even part or even traditional in our culture. I mean, like, for example, we use the harmonium. That's not an essential item in our culture. And therefore we have to consult Shastra to determine what are essential items in the culture. If we use some other instrument, like a keyboard or a guitar, is there some statement in Shastra that you can only use certain types of instruments, or you can only prepare certain types of food, to be Krishna conscious? So we have to understand, and also we have to see that many items that we consider to be of our culture actually come from historical context in India that was influenced by many other cultures coming in. You understand, like many of the types of food that we eat in Krishna consciousness are not actually, like transcendentally or described as being in the spiritual world. It's not going to be Krishna West lecture, don't worry. So, I'm just hinting at it. So, it's a good question. Yes, Krishna.
Time is limited, but the one thing that I was thinking about is that when you were speaking of different devotees will come, but then also at what one's destination, just like we learn that those who worship Lord Ramachandra will go to where Lord Ramachandra is. So isn't that like this speciality and the follows of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that we're taught about, Radha and Krishna and Goloka Vrindavan and Lord Chaitanya's, above.
Yeah.
So isn't that where someone who's a Vaishnava could go to Vaikuntha or different?
Yeah. I mean, I'm happy if someone goes to Vaikuntha. And the problem is most people are going to Kuntha rather than Vaikuntha. So, so we respect that, variety. I mean, Lord Chaitanya had variety amongst his followers. He had Nishingananda Brahmachari, who was a worshiper of Lord Nishingadev. And he got upset when Lord Chaitanya, you know the story in Chaitanya Charitamrita? Lord Chaitanya ate the offering that was meant for Lord Nishingadev. Of course, Lord Chaitanya was showing him that he and Lord Nishingadev are non-different. But he got upset. Why are you eating Lord Nishingadev's offering too? Anyway, interesting story. Okay, on that happy note, all glories to His divine grace. Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada.